everyone, and welcome once again to Geeks Not Nerds Live. It's the 6th annual multi-topic extravaganza. We're on the 4th week already, week 4 of the multi-topic extravaganza. I'm your host, Captain Logan, and here comes my amazing panel of co-hosts. First of all, right behind me, in the flesh, in the same room that I'm sitting in, it's Brown Coat Eric.
I'm here.
Look at him. He's here. It's not a robot. This is not an imaginary story.
This is the whole reason I came here, was just so I could be on a live show.
Yeah, now you've done it.
Drove all the way from Florida.
You can leave now.
Yeah, yeah.
You can get on the train, head on back. I get to keep all your stuff.
Oh, I wish I trained here. That'd be fun.
Yeah, but you wouldn't have been able to bring your 18 wine boxes of comics that way.
That's true.
And as always, it's bandana connoisseur Jackson Rasco.
It's good to be with you, people.
And the 8th wonder of the world, Steve Baxi.
I'm very glad that Ian finally got the CGI working so that Eric could always be here.
It's his masterpiece.
It is. It really is. I mean, I think in places he still lags a bit, but that's okay. The fact that he appears to be here is great.
It looks just like
it does, doesn't it?
Yeah. Now, are you a hologram of?
Well, see, somewhere in Florida, I'm completely covered in a green screen suit.
I was going to ask you if you were a hologram of you, or if you were you, like projecting yourself into here. Like, can you eat food and stuff?
Half of one, 6 dozen of another.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah. Talking with my hands tonight is going to be an issue.
Over here.
So tonight we're going to answer your questions, folks. And when I point, I don't mean Steve or Rasco. I mean you folks watching at home. We've got a lot of. I mean, you can ask questions if you want to, Eric, but it'll waste time. People would like to hear their questions answered. We have a lot of pre-written questions from the multi-topic intro video, and then periodically we're also going to take some of your live questions. So feel free anytime during the show in the comments if you're watching live, because it's pointless if you're watching after the fact, to write your question in the comments on the watch page there. And after every 3 questions, I'm going to have Rasco read us one of those. And we're going to begin right away with Five Keeper Sevenfool's question. Five Keeper Sevenfool's name is a mouthful. He says, for actors whose career has been either launched or destroyed by starring in comic book movies, how does that affect them psychologically and financially? Steve, why don't you write a paper for us? Some actors have experienced both cases, while many vow to never be in those kinds of films. Now, I feel like this is a really... This question is different now than it would have been even 10 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, the landscape's changed a lot. There are a lot of really big actors that would love to be in superhero movies. There are a lot of big actors that would hate it. And then you've got people like Michael Keaton who did it and started this whole thing, then made a movie about how much he hated it, only to come back and do it again next year. So it's complicated. I think there are a lot of weird cases of, like, if there was an actor or an actress or someone out there that made a bad superhero film and their career was destroyed for them, there was every chance they will come back and make it work again. Ben Affleck, Daredevil flopped, and then suddenly he is a Academy Award-winning director, and now he's Batman. Halle Berry was a bad Catwoman, but she was in 3 X-Men movies. She wasn't a good story, but she was in 3 X-Men movies. Or 4.
I think has also won an Oscar, if I'm not mistaken.
She did for Monsters Ball.
Okay, yeah. But like, there are a lot of those cases, like Robert Downey Jr. coming back and being a megastar because of Iron Man. No one would have predicted. It's just a different landscape, and a lot of times now it feels like comic book movies are the only things that are relatively making any money. So it's hard for actors to resist those parts unless they've already got an established career.
I don't think you're going to have, at least for a good long time, while this continues to be in vogue and arguably kind of a fad, actors who come in are known, for their big starring role in a superhero movie, and then because of that, they can't get work after that. That doesn't seem to be happening anymore.
Yeah.
Well, I think you also end up with actors. I don't know if this happens as much anymore, but there's certainly back in the day. We had actors who would come in, they were famous for a superhero role and still to this day seem to think that, like, we want more of that. Like Wesley Snipes still talks about making more Blade movies.
Yeah.
Like they're almost like they're still stuck back when they did that. Although I don't think Tobey Maguire does that.
That's a really good point too. You do sometimes have actors that are waiting for that career. Some people career-making role, and other people just the role they want to be remembered for. And once they get to that, especially if they're young enough, they never want to stop doing it.
Mm-hmm.
Rasco, you want to jump in?
I was just gonna say, yeah, I kind of agree that I think it's just a weird case right now where, because I think like people just accept more things on screen than they used to. It's like we can have things like Guardians of the Galaxy where like, could that have really been a movie like 30 years ago that people would have taken seriously? Who knows? And so I just think that because we accept more films, less actors get typecasted in like the weird out there stuff because we just kind of accept that stuff as the type of movies that get made nowadays.
We talk about a lot of different kinds of blurred lines, and I think the blurred line between TV and movies now is also an important thing to bring up during this too, where it just like fame is so different from what we used to think of it. That if you can be like a big megastar that does both TV and movies and what have you, everything in between, people aren't going to say, oh, that person was this silly character in a superhero movie. They can't do anything serious now, and vice versa. We've broken so many barriers with stuff that whenever you get like the big, major, critically acclaimed older actors that show up in Marvel movies, nobody's surprised anymore.
Well, and I think Marvel in particular has done this good job of, even if they haven't particularly serviced them well, Marvel will get those big, more indie actors that wouldn't do a big budget movie, and they'll just be villains. They're not committing to a franchise. They show up for a movie. They do the big fun blockbuster thing, and then they leave. And they go back to doing what they like to do.
Or in the case of Red Skull, you get an actor who doesn't want to ever do it again, but they probably would have loved to have had Red Skull again.
Yeah, probably.
Ben Kingsley and Anthony Hopkins are good examples. Although Anthony Hopkins is Odin, so.
And is actually coming back. He said he wouldn't come back.
Yeah, he said he was done too.
Now he's back.
So there's a paycheck this big in there.
To be fair, though, Anthony Hopkins tends to be my favorite parts of those Thor movies. Like when he throws Thor out of Asgard, that's my favorite scene in that whole movie.
Do you also just not like Thor? Are you like, yeah?
Well, no,
throw him out.
He's incoherent.
Oh. Okay. Let's go ahead and move on, shall we? Good question. Thanks a lot. Geek Knight 4. Can a character who is incessantly unproactive be sympathetic? This is a thing I've talked about a lot in different kinds of reviews, and especially in Spawn Year. I like the word incessantly there. I think that's interesting. I don't know if you meant incessantly or inherently, but I like them both. Someone who's incessantly unproactive. I mean, extremely. They just sit around and never do anything. Can that person be sympathetic? And I'm going to let one of you guys field it first.
I got it.
Jump on this? Oh, no. Let's go to Rasco. Go ahead.
I got it. I just recently watched the movie Requiem for a Dream.
Oh.
And I really, really liked that movie. And I think that could potentially fall into that category of characters that are... at the end of the day, I think the big crux of the film is that you're watching characters just do absolutely nothing to better their lives, and then their lives just continue to spiral out of control in a horrible way. And it's kind of just the tragedy of watching that happen to someone because they can't change and they just keep doing absolutely nothing to improve their life. But that's like an example of it where it's worked like once.
I think there are more examples though. Like in Bruges is like that. Like Colin Farrell's character never does anything to actively better himself. It's just the circumstances and the revelations of his character that make him sympathetic. But like even classically,
also kind of like that.
Yeah, but then it's also like classically like Hamlet. Hamlet is literally about a guy that's incapable of doing anything, and that's the whole tragedy.
Importantly, all of these examples, right, are things where the story is about the fact that these people are not are not unsympathetic, or I mean, excuse me, are not proactive about the fact that they're passive, and that there are consequences to that. When characters are usually, of course, you want your character to be proactive in a story, and that's because you don't want the world to coalesce to their will. You don't want things to just happen to them or happen for them, and we can't relate to a story where everything goes right for a character, or there's like a conflict and then it's easily beaten through no fault of the protagonist, because that's not how life works, and we don't understand that. That doesn't compute to us, because that's not what actually happens. So if you have a character who is completely who is incessantly unproactive, that character has to either change their ways, bad things have to happen because of that, or it has to be a tragedy.
Yeah.
And I think you could potentially have a comedy, maybe
That's what I was about to
something
say.
farcical, where somebody doesn't ever things happen for themselves, where they are sympathetic and we like them, but and things kind of work out for them. But again, it's still about that, right? In the sense that it knows it's doing that. It's when it doesn't know. It's when it's a writer using Deus Ex Machinas or
Convenience or coincidence
as a crutch. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, comedy usually is the exact opposite of what we're talking about there. Where like the character does everything and it constantly goes wrong, and that's why it's funny. So to have a character do nothing and things still go wrong, I think would be. I feel like we may have done that at some point.
That's kind of what Pineapple Express is. I mean, he's just kind of going about his life, and just bad things start happening to him.
Yeah.
And this is the end. I think a lot of Seth Rogen movies are like that.
I mean, a lot of old classic like Looney Tunes cartoons and stuff are about like a person not trying to do anything and bad stuff just keeps happening.
Bugs Bunny keeps happening.
Let's go to answer one more question, and then we'll go to the live audience. John DeMarco, what is your opinion on the TV show Young Justice? Young Justice has been coming up a lot lately. I guess mostly just because it was not so long ago finally put on Netflix. I've never watched past the pilot. I've got to finally do that at some point. Yeah, we're gonna do that soon. It's funny because I was over at a guy's house today, and he turned on the 4th episode. I've not watched very much of that show under the background, and I was like, okay, so when I catch up to this episode, I'm going to see this scene and be like, yeah, I saw that at this guy's house, because he has to have the TV on all the time. So no, that's a show you like a lot.
I love Young Justice. It is my at least season 1. Season 2 is a drop off. I don't hate season 2 as much as Steve hates season 2, but season 2 is drop off. Season
How
1.
many things can we say that with? Daredevil. I don't hate season 2 as much as
Season 1 of Young Justice is my
Steve
favorite superhero show of all time, and I think maybe the best American animated series of all time. At least for the things I'm looking for in storytelling and things like that.
either of you guys.
I've never seen
Eric.
Justice.
I agree with Eric. I think season 1 is brilliant. I think season 2 is awful. I didn't like Young Justice season 1 though as much as I liked Green Lantern animated series. Though I really loved that show.
Which I have not seen.
Oh, it's so good. You could hate Green Lantern and it's still just so good.
I never feel confident anymore saying this is the best of something, knowing I haven't seen everything that's ever existed.
I'm pretty confident with the high quality of Young Justice. Payoffs and the seeding things that get revealed later. Oh, it's so good.
The freeze villains in the pilot, you think it's just a one-off
Oh,
gag.
they come back. It's so great.
I love it.
Why don't we go ahead and field a live question? Rasco, give us something cool and meaty.
Okay, this is from Logan Dodd. Due to social media...
I like him already!
Great name, Logan. Due to social media, have fans become too powerful and influential on filmmakers and filmmaking?
Yes, absolutely.
Just open a can of worms there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Eric.
I think we make things way too reactionary. We've seen this now where films action will completely change because of fan reaction. We just saw it with Suicide Squad. I wouldn't be surprised if we see it with League. This didn't used to happen. At least not with everything. And it feels like it's everything now is either specifically designed in some way to pander, and they know what people want, they think they know what people want, or it's reacting to something negative where they're trying to give people what they want.
Superficially.
And it's because it's so quick. Like, we didn't used to have this. Like, when a movie was really bad, instantaneous, everyone agreed, everyone knew that something was bad. It is now. Now it's trending. You know, everyone gets out of the midnight showing and it's trending how bad it is. I think it's been incredibly detrimental to the film and comic industry.
It's just popular art in general, right?
Yeah.
I feel like it's an issue of extremes, because so often you hear people say, well, if only the filmmaker would talk to the fans first. You hear that all the time. There is sometimes some truth to that. But the problem is that reaction is now immediate. It's guttural. We don't have a shot at it and really get our thoughts together. And so while at one time there seemed to be never any interaction, a lot of the time, between filmmakers and their audience, and the audience could kind of maybe help them out with things that aren't really working in their films, make suggestions that maybe are good ideas that they should run with. Now we have so much of that there's got to be a nice midpoint. The comics medium has always been interesting because of letters pages, because we, going back to Stan Lee and before, you've got the audience talking to the people making it and making suggestions, and that there have been a lot of cool things that wouldn't have happened without some of those suggestions. So you want some of that.
So I'm just gonna rip off Bo Burnham real quick, but he has a comedy special called Make Happy, and in the middle of that whole thing is really meta about the idea of performance. But in the middle of it, he just like sits down, turns on the lights, and tells the audience that social media has created this problem where it has merged performer and audience, where through social media you are now performing everything, and you're like creating the story of your life for you, and that bleeds into your ability to interact with other people, and then creates a weird skew of expectations both on the part of the people creating the content and the people reacting to it. So I love the idea that I can just like send out a tweet and Tom King is going to read it, but I hate the idea that I can send out a tweet, Tom King is going to read it, and then change his story.
Yeah, and possibly not for the better.
Yeah.
Maybe your idea sucks, Steve.
Yeah, maybe it does. I don't come up with good ideas. I just react to them.
There's no maybe.
Rasco, do you have anything to add?
I was gonna say, it is really strange how like connected you can be with certain creators of any sort of art. And like, for example, like I follow Max Landis on Snapchat, and he just finished filming the first season of Dirk Gently, and I've been like seeing like things from the set of him like just showing like things of like the process of making that show on his Snapchat story, and it's like really strange like how connected you can be to the actual people making the stuff that you then are going to criticize vocally on social media towards them.
Yeah, and you'll hear creators all the time talk about how fans feel like they own these properties too much, but we live in a world where it's difficult not to.
And we're kind of industries are now reacting as if they do own these properties. We're catering to fan whims instead of doing what we actually think is best.
It's art because it stops being self-expression at that point, or it can.
Mm-hmm.
Not be as much of self-expression.
Well, and we're
as
certainly seeing I think in comics we see it a little bit in movies. I think with comics it's a little bit easier because it's monthly, they can do this. But we're starting to see things where it's almost feels designed to get a Twitter trending thing, or Bendis has this thing in Iron Man with facial hair bros.
Oh,
like
God.
that was clearly trying to get a hashtag. It's the worst part of that first arc. And I think we're seeing that more and more, where we're trying to think that fans will then keep doing and carry on.
Anybody want to add anything else before we move on to the next question? That's probably one we should field as an entire GNN at some point. We'll say all the things we just said and more Okay, let's go ahead then. This is one we get probably every multi-topic extravaganza. We've got people here who have not gotten to be on a lot of Q&As, so it'll be cool to see if you guys think of anything you haven't before, especially since we live in a world now where nothing surprises me as far as characters who might get movies or TV shows. Nick Ruzzi, what DC Marvel story that has not yet been adapted should be made? Every time. Does anybody have an immediate response? Why don't we have this character yet?
Wait, are we just talking about characters or stories? Oh, that was stories.
Stories, excuse me.
Okay.
Yeah, you're right. This is a story question, and that's harder.
I want to see the original Death of Captain Marvel, where he dies of cancer. I think that would just be a really interesting, different kind of superhero movie.
I would love Starman, to, at least for like the first couple arcs, to get an anime movie. But I've also always loved the idea of creating a short, just pure beginning, middle, and end 100 episode Batman animated series, which is just Nightfall. Beginning, middle, and end, including the thing with Dick Grayson at the end. I think that could be fun.
So you stole my obvious one that I was trying really hard not to go for. You know, it's like it's the obligatory Captain Logan response, and now I can't even use that.
Well, in the 12 episode Art Deco style Long Halloween.
Yeah.
That seems like and can I ask you guys a question? Why were people like pushing Sewing Joke movie over a Long Halloween movie?
Because Long Halloween is 12 issues. Like I think on some level people understand like you have to truncate it for a movie.
You know what? That's a good point. It should be a miniseries.
I also think like Killing Joke has more lines and scenes that have culturally permeated in a way that Long Halloween hasn't. Like people know Long Halloween's a famous Batman story. How many people actually know stuff that happens in it that haven't read it?
That's a good point. But it just bugs me because we always want to adapt things regardless of whether or not the story would make any sense off the page.
Yeah, well, I mean,
or how difficult it would be to adapt it to another.
There are lots of examples of like just short stories in Batman that could be great for animated movies because clearly they were thinking movies when they wrote them. Like Batman Broken City, the Brian Azzarello story, that should be a movie. But
I was just showing Captain the Noir book of that.
Oh, cool! Yeah,
that was that black and white thing I was showing you.
I wouldn't mind seeing a sort of you'd have to do this very differently. But I wouldn't mind seeing Mask of the Phantasm adapted to live action in some way, like bring in that character, do a big Batman's being framed story. I guess the problem with it, of course, is that everybody would know the ending. It'd be really hard to do that reveal again.
I think you'd also have the trouble like it be partially just Batman Begins again.
Yeah, that's the other problem with it.
Well, and I'd like to see good chunks of the Fraction Iron Man adapted to the Iron Man films.
So much of that would be fun to see on screen.
I just know I'm going to think of really good things here in a minute, and I don't know. Yeah, Red Lanterns enter an animated miniseries.
Punisher kills the Marvel Universe.
Wolverine Enemy of the State, I feel like should have gotten
sounds impossible
before Hugh Jackman quit.
Okay, Cody Barron, with Christopher Nolan's Dunkirk coming out next summer, I think it will do financially against the major lineup of highly anticipated blockbusters like War of the Planet of the Apes. Oh boy, Planet of the Apes! I can't wait. Spider-Man: Homecoming and Arian and the City of a Thousand Planets. I haven't even heard about that.
That's the thing that I told you about. That's based on a French comic. That's a big space opera.
Oh,
it's got the guy that played Harry Osborn in it and the girl that plays Enchantress.
Is Nolan's name enough to make it a hit? At this point, that's a really good and I think a giant toss-up, given the fact that Interstellar was not real well received, and certainly not as well received as.
And I think the studio was expecting it to be the next Inception, because Inception was a huge film both critically and commercially. Like with audiences, and I don't feel like Interstellar was.
No, I'm sure it made money, but it didn't do that.
But it wasn't like the thing people were talking about and still talking about, months later.
Definitely. What do you think, Rasco? Rasco's been following the production for this movie.
It's okay. So I think for one, Dunkirk is a much more accessible type of movie because it's just like a war film. So I think I think there's less likelihood that it gets too like heady, like some people would complain of some of Christopher Nolan's movies, and I think it is going to be more of a character-focused movie from stuff that I've read about the actors and stuff like that on set. And I think his movies don't necessarily need to be huge, giant movies that compete with things like Civil War anymore, because like it's just a matter of Christopher Nolan. He's gotten to a place where he can make movies that are very likely to not flop. It's incredibly unlikely that, because just his name is attached. So he can make movies like Dunkirk, he can make movies like Inception, he can make movies like Interstellar, which are kind of expensive movies, but he doesn't need to make giant Batman level blockbuster films anymore. So I think that people kind of expect his movies to be those when they don't necessarily need to at this point. At this point, he's just a name that they know they can make consistent profit off of, the same way that Quentin Tarantino makes his movies.
Do you think that's true now? Do you think that's still true?
What?
2 does not make a pattern, certainly, and Rises was hugely financially successful. But but Rasco, inherently in this question is the question: does his name still carry that kind of weight necessarily?
Well, most people do like Rises in the general public.
Yeah,
I think Interstellar, as far as the general public is concerned, is the only one that people didn't really like. People love Inception and Dark Knight. I think if anything hurts him, it's that his name has been attached to the universe, even though he hasn't been actually part of those films. And maybe regular Joe that goes to the movies doesn't made by him.
And it also helps that he's not cranking something out every year or two.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, you're probably right. I think it's really important that this one is good. Like, even if it's not hugely financially successful, it needs to critically.
Yeah, no, there's definitely a question of, like, if this is going to be a movie where it's like, okay, he needs to, like, make another memorable film that everyone kind of all agree, like, that's not a polarizing film. He needs to, again, make some sort of movie that doesn't have to be Dark Knight or Inception, but it needs to be, like, overall, people kind of agree this movie was a pretty, I guess, Christopher Nolan level of quality film. And then that solidifies that, okay, he's still in the game, I guess. But, I mean, after this, if it's really bad, then there is a question of, like, oh, is Christopher Nolan still making good movies anymore? That's certainly going to be, like, a question. And after that, I think that people would definitely be very standoffish against his next movie if Dunkirk's not very good.
I think a better comparison
Situation where he could turn into the next Shyamalan or something, and I don't think that would happen. But people might start thinking in that direction if the next one isn't really good. I am glad that he's getting to make something a little smaller. The strategy seems to be simply again, hopefully. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Steve.
I was going to say, I think a better comparison than the comic book movies is Ben Affleck's Live by Night, which also comes out next year, which is his next movie that he's directing after he won all those Oscars for Argo, and after he was the only thing that anyone consistently loved about BVS. So, I mean, it's also it's a period piece. It's from a director that gets lots of buzz in film circles. It's a person that's got lots of momentum and has been tied to big franchises. It will probably be more like if Live by Night's amazing and Dunkirk isn't, then Nolan maybe loses some points for people. Or if Live by Night isn't very good, then people are more anticipating Dunkirk.
Let's go ahead and move on, if that's cool. Rasco is so excited about Affleck, apparently.
I didn't even know it. I didn't heard of that film. What's it about?
Live by Night is basically a movie where Ben Affleck is the son of a police captain, and it takes place during Prohibition. So he starts his own alcohol bootlegging company, but it's also got like these ties to his dad's part of the police. He's part of the mob, that kind of thing. They just released a trailer. It looks amazing. I'm really excited.
Yeah, it looks. Really
I'll have to watch that.
It looks really good.
And also Affleck wrote it this time, so.
Cool. Next comment comes from Separate Along Earth. Why do you think Batman movies don't like to include more of the iconic characters and props from the comics And remember, the new prerequisite is that every question must have quotation marks in it so that I can do this. Such as Robin, Giant Penny, Oracle, the Robot Dinosaur, Ace, Nightwing, Bat, Women, and so on. I think you have to look at this historically on a case-by-case basis, where there are different answers to that question depending on the era and who's making the movie, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
To that, like I think many of them are liable or definitely going to happen moving forward with a more heightened comic book inspired universe as we're getting with the DC movies now. The answer to that with the Nolan movies is he tried to make something more grounded. You weren't going to have a Giant Penny or the Robot Dinosaur, and you weren't going to have a legacy that went on long enough to get something like that.
I kind of wish we had the Giant Penny and Dinosaur in BBS when we go to the Batcave.
Me too.
Yeah.
Since that's supposed to be a universe that has a history already anyways.
But since it's got that Jason Todd costume, or what we're assuming is a Jason Todd costume, you have to assume more of those things are going to happen. I don't think you can preclude things like, or you can assume that you can't have things like Ace the Bat Hound and stuff even.
It's the way they did it in the animated series and beyond.
Yeah.
Where it's just a big dog called Ace.
Yeah.
Mhm.
It'd be awesome.
Which is one of the best things about that show. I love their dog.
It'd be so cool.
I'm sorry I kind of took that question and ran with it, but anybody have more things to add?
I just want Robin.
Once again, we can blame Burton for not being accurate to the comics.
I just want
Although honestly, I'm really surprised there was not a Giant Penny in Forever Batman Robin the Batcave.
Me too. Yeah.
Yeah.
Ras, would you give us a live question, please, sir?
Okay, this is from Cody Man. What horror icons could you see mixing in well with superheroes in general? Yellow Lantern Freddy, Norman Bates and Gotham. Maybe this is a stupid question, LOL, but just thinking.
Hellraiser
It's kind of fun.
mixed with Hellblazer. That needs to happen.
Yeah, no, and Freddy, Doctor Strange.
Yeah, Freddy, Doctor Strange. And also, I think Michael Myers could actually be a pretty good Doctor Strange villain, too.
I think Michael Myers is a great Batman villain. Especially like if you want to go with like Rob Zombie, Michael Myers too, because that Michael Myers is pretty much like just a horribly psychologically twisted child, and you get to see his whole origin. So you take that and then you spin that into Batman. It'd be really cool.
But if you go with the John
good
Carpenter
class-
version, where he's just pure evil and like that's the whole point of him,
Yeah.
I think that's a really interesting dilemma for Batman to actually have to deal with the idea of someone who's just bad. He's not even crazy. He's just evil.
Yeah, that would be really
These seem
cool.
like
So-
mashups that would make a lot of sense. Look at whatever the comic companies or in a lot of these, I'm sure don't even. A lot of companies, I'm sure, don't even own any of these. But like if comic companies could get the license to some of those big horror characters, it no brainer to turn some of them into Batman villains or other things. What I would do is I would do a comic miniseries where each issue is unrelated to the last. You do like 5 or 6 one and done stories where it's various characters from you do it either in DC or Marvel from the DC universe or the Marvel universe stay at the Bates Motel. And I think like the question goes to the Bates Motel sounds like a cool idea to me.
Oh, that would be really cool.
Oh, yeah.
That would be awesome.
Or what happens if the Punisher goes to the Bates Motel? Like really, kind of anybody goes to the Bates Motel.
Oh, that would be really cool.
Iron Man meets Alien. I think that could be really
Oh,
good.
that would
See,
be so
Alien
cool.
and Predator work mixed with everybody, especially because it's been done so well so many times in DC.
Yeah.
Yeah. I would also love to see
Wanna see
Predators
it
hunt
keep
Iron
going.
Man. That'd be cool.
Well, and Predator and Daredevil would be cool.
That
Yeah,
would be
since-
really cool.
Yeah.
Since they
Oh
both
my
have
god.
the sense vision kind of a thing.
No.
And since we're just
Cool.
ignoring Jason, maybe Jason fights the Punisher.
Yeah.
That would be awesome.
Yeah,
as
that'd
be
well.
cool.
That's a really good one.
Superman, Alien, and Predator is the reason I've always said, well before Man of Steel and BVS, that you can make a really dark Superman story. You just make sure Superman's not the dark part of it. Because I always thought that was a really cool, weird blend. Where it's a sci-fi horror thriller thing, but Superman's there, and it doesn't make Superman some other thing. It's just Superman in a really dark story.
some kind of story where Chucky teams up with Toyman?
Yeah.
Naturally.
Also, Jonah Hex meets everyone from
No brainer,
Texas
sir.
Massacre.
Chucky and the ventriloquist. That would be a good one.
Oh yeah, Chucky and the ventriloquist would be good.
What if there was like a ventriloquist version of Chucky, where somehow or rather, like, or not ventriloquist, but like there's a doll, not a doll, there's a puppet that Chucky goes into instead of Chucky for whatever reason, like his mind goes in there, and then the ventriloquist picks it up and thinks it's just a doll, and for whatever reason decides to make it the new Scarface, and then after a while realizes, oh, it's actually alive, but he doesn't know whether or not it's in his head or if it's actually alive, and he's very confused.
How about Leprechaun in Batman? That would be really cool.
Oh my God, that'd be the best.
He's a Batman villain.
Especially because there was an episode of the animated series where Batman just thinks leprechauns are a thing.
Literally,
remember that, Steve?
Literally all these people versus Ghost Rider. I could see that.
That's what I was about. I was going to say Pumpkinhead and Ghost Rider.
Yeah.
Pumpkinhead and the Jack-o'-lantern of Ghost Rider.
Yeah.
Deadpool versus Alien. Because if you do Deadpool versus Alien, he can get the face hugger on him and then have the chest burster come out of him, and then it will just heal back up, so he can go through the full Alien like life cycle and like just survive it, and it'd be really funny because it's like a Deadpool gag.
That'd be awesome.
Let's go move on. Great question. Thanks for that. Greater Geek. Hey, Cap and gang, love your channel. Thanks. Thank you for doing what you do. So I'm an aspiring filmmaker who believes that movies are a visual medium. I get really frustrated with films that rely too heavily on dialogue and skimp on creative shot choices to tell a story. And he says Stanley Kubrick is his favorite director. Hollywood-wise, Spielberg and Hitchcock are masters, and this is a long question, and in my opinion, their unparalleled skill as visual storytellers is the main reason for the reverence they hold today. Let's see if we can figure out what the question is. Looks like I have to keep going. Yeah, this is an element of cinema that most critics and audiences don't seem to talk about or even notice at all. For instance, critics loved Terrence Malick's Tree of Life. I haven't seen that. But in all the reviews of that film, I didn't hear anyone discussing his choice of wide-angle lenses and frequent jump cuts, and more importantly, how those visual choices made them feel. Is this something you guys notice when watching a movie, and do you think it's something that should be more discussed, along with character and study, when critiquing the quality of the film?
I have a real simple answer for me, which is, much like a score, I tend to really only notice those things when they're really bad or really good.
I feel like we need to be a lot more. I feel like we need to do this a lot more. Like, I feel like shot composition and stuff is essential to films, but it's really difficult to go in and study those unless you're going in and intentionally like breaking a movie apart, like frame by frame. Like, it's very difficult within the film experience to latch on to specific shots without taking yourself out of it. So it's hard to talk about or hard to write about. But I really do feel like we need to talk about it. Where like script only gets you so far. I've seen bad scripts that work beautifully with good directors. It's a lot of times it's just a matter of like these are words, terms, ideas, and angles that like I just know nothing about. Like, I can't tell you what a wide angle lens looks like, but if I read up on it, I would love to do an analysis based on that. I think they're essential and they're important. It's just I don't know enough about them, and maybe that's just a matter of like these are not things that permeate conversation or things that we teach as often as how to write something.
You when you just brought up like a bad script, are you what did you say about like a good movie coming out of a bad script or something like that?
Like, you could visually make a really good movie out of a bad script.
Yeah. Okay, so the best example of that is the script for Mad Max Fury Road, because think about what that script must be. It's like literally Max, and then it's like cars drive, Max again. It's like that script is. There's barely anything there. That movie has very little dialogue for a lot of it.
But I don't think that's a bad script. I think that's
it's not a bad script. It's not. But like that really could be a horrible movie if you don't understand how to translate that into an effective movie format. Like that can be difficult. And that's like the best example of like why it's so important to understand that there is only so much you can do in a screenplay.
I think a
you're
really
gonna
good example
figure out a lot
is
on the set when you're actually filming.
I think a really good example is Seven, which I think is a really cookie cutter, easy script that on the page is pretty much the same as any other serial killer thriller movie that came out in the 90s. But because it was David Fincher, it's this great thriller. And I think that's something that really comes down to performances and how it's shot and directed and things like that.
Horror movies have this too, right? Like horror movie scripts very generally aren't exactly groundbreaking works of genius writing, but horror movies work or don't work based on how they're shot, how the music's composed, the actors involved. Like it's very difficult to find a horror movie that's got a brilliant script, but is directed badly, and you still say it's a good horror movie. Like The Omen is a good script, but it's shot beautifully, it's acted beautifully. That's the only reason people remember it. So much of what's brilliant about that movie comes from the production of it, not the writing.
Yeah,
I mean that's a thing.
Go ahead, Cap. Go ahead.
And that's the thing that, as Steve earlier, that is difficult to articulate, especially if you've not studied it. So people ask me all the time, or not all the time, but every now and again, especially recently, I've gotten criticism for not talking more about art in Comet Vaults. And I'm not a visual guy. I've not studied on it. I can't draw. I'm not an artist. And you say, well, you don't have. It's not a prerequisite to be a writer, clearly, to be a film critic, or to be a filmmaker, or to have ever done anything with storytelling. So why can you critique those things? And of course, I do have background in that. But why can you critique those things if you don't actually do it? But you can't critique art. I think art is more technical. Or at least to me, not being a visual guy, it's hard not to feel like it kind of is. Since movies are all about the storytelling, it's and those things are all trappings. Those can make things very effective in a story. But it's really easy for us, like Eric said, to notice them only when they're really, really good or really bad. It's when a movie is like just really mediocre, you can immediately go to, okay, here are the characters. Did I find them compelling or not? And you're kind of gonna, I think, often kind of stop there.
I think cinematic language is a thing we talk a lot about, but very rarely when it comes to movies that we love. Like there are a lot of things where, like, and I hate to go back to this example, but like Batman versus Superman, regardless of what you think of that movie thematically, there are things of just like the way we craft visual storytelling. It seems to not really be following those rules. Shane Black's a great example of a director and a writer that understands how visually the story is going to be conveyed, so he doesn't necessarily need to say something. You just have to watch it enough times, and you connect those dots.
Yeah, I agree. If you look at like a genre that really suffers from people just not caring about cinematic language, is the comedy genre. You get so many bad comedy movies. And then one like The Nice Guys sticks out because it's actually directed like a movie, and not just a movie. It's directed like a movie from like the 70s. And that's what's really cool about that movie. And that's a great movie. One of my favorite movies of the year. But you look at comedies, and that's one of the genres where like comedies now look like SNL skits, and it's ridiculous. They just don't even try. It's as simple as like point and shoot with comedies at this point. You have directors like Edgar Wright, who are some of the few people working in comedy that actually bring a comedic aesthetic to the way they direct movies. And that's why movies like Scott Pilgrim are so awesome, because they're funny in the editing and in the cinematography and in the acting and the dialogue. So it's not just simply watching comedians ad-lib back and forth. Every aspect of the movie is used to make it funnier.
Wes Anderson has this too, where like he plays with the 2D idea. So like comedy doesn't come from going left and right; it comes from moving back and forth. Like stuff like that's really tricky to pull off. But if you know that vocabulary, it really enhances a movie's experience.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think importantly, it will still enhance it for a lot of people without their even realizing it or being able to tell you why that worked. Sometimes you'd have even people familiar with that vernacular, like Roger Ebert, have a. He would sometimes have a review that would kind of, by the end of it, just kind of come down to, this was an experience I want to have again. And that doesn't happen with, usually, I don't think, when we're talking about an experience over getting down to the brass tacks of why I was compelled by a story, if it's not a really visually artistic. I doubt he ever said that for something that wasn't incredibly visually stylistic. This was a good discussion. Should have been its own video. Let's go ahead and move on now to another question, shall we?
You picked a paragraph for a question. What did you expect?
I didn't pick it. I have to read all of these, Eric. It's the rules. I came up with Carl Maxey. Is it necessary to watch any DC TV shows if Flash is going to rebirth everything? I think we have to watch that and see what exactly they're doing with it. There's no way that they're rewriting over everything.
It's not necessary to watch any of them if they don't rebirth it.
I was gonna make the
He means for understanding what's going on, Eric. That's what he's talking about. I still say this. I will be very surprised if the rebirth, because it's really more 52. It's the Flashpoint thing. I have a really hard time believing that we're not doing that for any reason other than to get Supergirl into that continuity proper. And so it won't be a rewrite everything that's happened thing. I doubt. I think it'll just be a mix some universes together.
And if it is, that would be television. Has anything like that ever happened before?
Almost never. And I've seen examples when it kind of ought to have. The big one that always go to is Enterprise, where we stopped the temporal Cold War from having ever happened. That changed. It seems to have changed the Star Trek universe to the point where the first 3 seasons should not have happened, and yet we stopped the impetus of the temporal Cold War, wiped it out. None of that stuff ever happened, and yet everyone remembers it. We have another season, and we can't start over like it's season 1. So there's no way Flash does that. Now those shows have done some really counterintuitive things. Once again, we live in a day and age where nothing surprises me. Eric, I could see it on Gotham before I saw it anywhere. Because that show, you guys were talking about cinematic language. That show has no rules. Is there any chance that Flash with Flashpoint actually wipes over anything?
I will be blown
takes
away
anything out
if it affects like any kind of history.
It's weird because I just had the idea that maybe they would try to use it as kind of like the Days of Future Past was used for the X-Men films. They could have used it as like that to like make a better continuity so we can take out some of the stuff that we kind of all don't like about Arrow and Flash and change some things around and not have to get there like gradually and fluidly. We can just like
we could finally get rid of his dad's notebook.
Yeah.
Arrow.
But I'm like, at the same time, we can't do things like that because aren't we still going to be having flashbacks to Oliver's like fifth year on the island?
Yeah,
this should be the last.
The showrunners for Arrow confirmed that Flashpoint is going to affect it.
So will that timeline be different? So is like the timeline that we now see in the flashbacks not even the timeline we've been watching for 4 seasons? Like what?
I'd be surprised. Like keep in mind that just because they've said that Flashpoint will affect it doesn't mean that any of the history changes. That Flash is the name of a story they're telling. They could say that.
Yeah, it could just affect it moving forward, not going backwards.
Also, keep in mind that the status quo at the beginning of the next season for Legends of Tomorrow looks too close to what we've had. We're not even changing much of that cast. Are they going to suddenly be in the time stream and go to other time periods, and then Flashpoint changes that? Oh, but it takes time to change things. So I guess maybe. So I guess really Flashpoint could happen. And then they don't notice it until the end of their season. I guess like, okay, just count Legends of Tomorrow. It's a mulligan. moving on.
It's really weird because if the previews for Flash have shown that everything's completely different, and I don't know because these characters have interacted with people on the other shows, so I don't know how Flash can be completely different without altering the history of the previous shows. But it doesn't look like Arrow's history has changed, so I don't know.
Well, what they'll probably do is
There'll be a reset.
Something happens, and so the Flash show is in like an alternative episodes, and then we come back, and maybe a couple of things are changed in real reality.
Yeah,
Maybe.
Like Days of Future Past or Age of Apocalypse, I guess.
Now, I haven't looked into it previously yet, Steve, but have you seen anything that would destroy the possibility that all of the weird, different status quo stuff you're seeing can't be changed with a light switch thing at the end of an episode?
Well, the big thing is that Barry's not the Flash anymore, opening with Flashpoint, and he hasn't been ever. And there are big Arrow things that require him to be there. So,
well, no, that's true. But again, but they could do that for a couple of episodes and then switch it back.
Well, and
no,
they're
it's
not.
true. It's just like if the other shows don't deal with it, that whole Arrowverse idea is going to collapse really quickly, even though it already has, but more so.
That before, why would it matter? And not for a long time.
I mean, I think it's safe to assume no matter what they do, it won't make sense.
Yeah, no, this has been a pendulum swinging without a thing in the middle holding it for a good long time. You haven't had a fulcrum for a really long time. The Arrow Flash. Somebody feel free to quote me on this. The Arrow Flash universe is without a fulcrum. It's fulcrumless. Fulcrum. Okay, let's do one more quick one, and then we'll go back to the live audience. Anime 7, do you think Power Pack could work in the MCU? And if so, what format should they be? Should it be on Freeform, Hulu, Netflix, the movies, or ABC? Power Pack. Anybody
I think
care
that'd be
about
a
Power Pack?
great Hulu series or Marvel's first attempt at actually doing a family-aimed or just children-aimed show, which they're not doing at all. Like they're all of their stuff is kind of catch-all, but it's really aimed, I would say, probably at the teenager and above audience.
Mm-hmm.
But Kids Power Pack is a great way for them to actually make a show for children. I don't think Power Pack should be movies.
Yeah, I don't think so either.
With as bad as the Marvel animation's been, I don't really want this, but Power Pack would have been a really cool idea as a tie-in cartoon to the MCU.
Yeah, I don't want to put Jeff Loeb anywhere near Power Pack.
I don't either, but like ideally, it just seems like a concept that works better as a cartoon than it does anywhere else.
There is a pilot from the 80s somewhere.
Yeah.
There is a Cloak and Dagger show that was in development. I don't know if it still is. That was supposed to be on Freeform.
Yeah, they just got
That was
show
back
on
when
it.
they were doing the Hulk thing, right?
Oh, so that is happening then.
Yeah,
No, this is recent.
Oh.
And the reason I bring it up, Eric, is because it's the closest thing to family-friendly thing because it's like a teen drama thing.
Is Freeform what?
ABC Family.
ABC Family.
Yeah.
Well, it was Fox Family before that. I still remember it as Fox Family. In my heart, it's Fox Family.
Is that the same thing as ABC? Did ABC buy up?
Fox Family became ABC Family.
Was it the Family Channel before that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, those are all the same thing.
I never saw the Fox Family. I've never heard of that. It's been
it was.
For probably 6 months is my guess. It was probably called that for all of 6 months. No? Okay, I'll look up. I somehow rather I have not. And the Family Channel was still a thing when I was a kid, so I don't know. Anyway, let's get a question. We got about 10 minutes left on the clock. Rasco.
Okay. This is from Masked Sci-Fi Fan. Do you guys think it's possible for a movie to be too ambitious to the point that it affects its overall quality?
Interstellar. We just talked about it.
Spider-Man
It tried way too hard in way too many places, and it just doesn't hold together quite well.
Spider-Man 3.
Yeah. Batman
Ghostbusters was nearly that. I mean, there's certainly lots of examples of that.
Was the question like quality-wise of like the special effects where it's too ambitious, it's too big for its budget? Because I think we see a lot of films where maybe they would have been better if they hadn't tried to make something as big as they did.
I mean, you can argue that about like
Like
X-Men
that.
Apocalypse, because X-Men Apocalypse had a smaller budget than Days of Future Past did, I think, and that was a much bigger movie.
And I didn't think
Yeah.
Apocalypse looked particularly good either. So,
I would agree. It doesn't look particularly good.
But no, Eric, you're right, because the question we were kind of answering before that was movies that are that are ambitious to the point where the story collapses in on itself. And what you're talking about is whether a project, a big project, is warranted for the people that are able to get involved to make it,
I think
the money they have.
I think we're going to run the risk of this with Rangers.
yeah.
To see if they
Yeah.
really,
I don't know what kind of budget they have.
yeah. Because if nothing else, they have to have giant robots fighting giant monsters. Wait for that.
Yeah, because you know that'll be CG.
If we're talking about special effects, it was on Cartoon Network the other day, but I was rewatching Sky High, and I love that movie. I think it's a great movie. But with special effects wise, it tries to do a lot, and none of it looks good. Even by 2005 standards, the CGI in that movie, even by 2005 standards, does not look good. Even though I think it's a pretty good movie.
That is just
It looks like a Disney Channel movie.
Scathing
It does. It
review
looks
of
like a TV
visuals.
movie, but it's a theatrical release with Kurt Russell in it.
It tries a lot, and
that's an
none of it
example-
looks good.
That's an example of a
The box
script
cover.
that's too good for their budget, right?
Yeah, which is
Oh,
weird,
yeah.
though, right? Like, how do you get the big celebrity cameos
almost never see
that you get and not have like a decent special effects budget or something?
It seems like a movie that was able to be what it was because nobody's going to be like really, like hard pressed to make sure it's in any particular thing. This is okay. It's some superhero thing. Who cares? You just make that movie.
Oh, another.
But then it gets all of those celebrity cameos. Yeah.
Another good example is Going to Hell
And
and
stars.
Spawn.
Yes.
They should never have done that. They didn't have the technology or the money to do that.
And yeah, at the time, you had an amazing vision of
Roger
hell.
Ebert.
Ebert says it. Yeah. The budget for the Power Ranger movie is $120 million.
That's not a movie like that.
No, it's not.
No.
But about what I would have expected.
I just hope they use it well.
About the ending of RoboCop, they could not succeed in that special effect.
What are you talking about? It looks great.
That looks amazing.
It looks as good as Die Hard.
Rasco, we don't have a lot of time left. Why don't we do one more live question since we've only fielded about three of those, and then we'll make the last question.
Okay, this is from Dimitri J. Is there anything you permanently associate with a certain comic book character from their adaptations, voices, theme music, etc.?
Superman is always
that's a great
Christopher Reeve.
question.
I can, every time I read Superman in anything or watch him in anything, he has to be Christopher Reeve in my head. I can't get over it. It's just Christopher Reeve.
Yeah, I kind of agree. John Williams' score is with Superman. That's kind of something that I always pair with that.
Yeah.
Wolverine's voice is always the one from the 90s animated series, and it doesn't matter what take it is, what version it is.
What,
and
you don't
whether or
like
not
X-Men
that is-
Evolution? You don't like X-Men Evolution?
I like his voice in that.
I didn't watch it. I didn't watch a ton of that, so I just that voice wouldn't come to my head. But that's a thing where it's like, "Rah, Gene."
It's really funny because I recently watched like a video that was like every single voice actor to play Wolverine. I heard like Mark Hamill do Wolverine from the X-Men 2 video game, where Mark Hamill does Wolverine. And I'm like, oh wow.
That casting choice does not compute in my brain. How did that happen?
I'm sending you back to Oz.
It kind of works.
Right, Eric, do you have this with anything?
I think I have
It's
this
always-
with a lot of things. I mean, we
Yeah.
talked about this. We haven't put the video up yet. With Man of Steel, there's a lot of stuff from Lois and Clark.
Yeah.
I have a lot of things just from childhood that stick with me as from the various animated series and live action things I watched that in my brain just feel right. Specific.
The Batman Begins score is in my head a lot reading Batman comics, especially if they're street level and gritty.
Yeah.
It's always with me. Steve's got to have this with stuff
Michael Rosemont as Lex is something I always like to keep in my head when I'm reading him.
over the internet. Yeah.
Well, we were talking about this. Jonathan Kent in Smallville is anytime he doesn't look young enough to be that Jonathan Kent, it is now weird for me. It throws me off now.
Mm-hmm.
Anything else? Krang. There's only one Krang voice.
Batman Beyond, that Bruce Wayne is like an old angry man.
Yeah.
There'll be discussions about like whether Batman would use like a Lazarus pit or like something like that. Would he use technology to prolong his youth? And because of Batman Beyond, like just fundamentally, I don't think he would, because I grew up on that show.
Yeah.
Well, folks, I think that's going to do it for us tonight. Thanks a lot for watching. Sure appreciate it. We'll be back with you again next Sunday night at 8 Central for another one of these. We're going to do another 2 or 3 weeks, try to get through as many questions as we can. If you still haven't left a question, a pre-written question, feel free to do that on the announcement video. There is a link to that in the description. We are over halfway there, it looks like. Maybe about halfway there. So we're gonna get through as much of it as we can. We'll probably cap this off at about 8 weeks if we don't get through them all by then, and then we'll be back to normal Geeks Not Nerds live episodes after that on Sunday nights. And join me and Lo tomorrow night at 10 o'clock for New Comic Late Night. We'll be talking about all the comics we read over the week. And in the meantime, I am Captain Logan, and this is Eric.
I'm Eric.
Rasco.
I'm Rasco.
And Steve.
I'm Steve.
Once again, I'm Captain Logan saying good night. Good night.